The game series, with nearly 30 years since the release of its first installment, has encompassed 10 main titles and 15 spin-off titles. Over the years, resulting in a total of 25 games released from this franchise. This collection has experienced many ups and downs throughout the years and has received a variety of scores. On one hand, Resident Evil Umbrella Corps, with a score of 38, is considered one of Capcom's worst games. On the other hand, Resident Evil 4, with a score of 96, ranks among the best games in the history of the video game industry.
Hi guys, I'm Sina. Welcome back to my channel. Review all release title from Resident Evil franchise, part 2. Please stay with me.
Resident Evil Survivor. Release 2000. Meta 39. Release platforms: PlayStation, Windows. Cost unknown. Sell 1.5 million copies. Playtime: Story mode 2 hours. Completion 4 hours. In 2000, Capcom released the first spin-off of the Resident Evil series, but the game faced harsh criticism from reviewers. The camera perspective shifted from third person to first person and making the game feel more like a pure action title. The game's issues were quite notable: weak and low quality graphics, a shallow and underdeveloped storyline, incomplete and flawed gameplay, short duration that the game could be completed in less than 2 hours. This game received a low score of 39 from critics. And not only is it considered the worst Resident Evil title after Umbrella Corps, but it is also regarded as one of Capcom's weakest games. Despite its poor reception, the game managed to sell 1.5 million copies. This success was mainly due to the fact that, at the time, any gamers didn't have quick access to game reviews like they do today, and purchased it solely based on the franchise name. It's easy to imagine that many fans, after the success of Resident Evil 3, bought the game hoping for a new installment, only to be met with a huge disappointment. It's best not to waste any more time on this title. Resident Evil Code Veronica. Release 2000. Meta 94. Platforms: Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, GameCube, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. Cost 10 million. Sell 2.5 million copies. Playtime: Story mode 12 hours. Side missions 2 hours. Completion 14 hours. The year 2000 was a year of stark contrast as for the Resident Evil series. On one hand, there was Resident Evil Survivor, with a score of 39. That is considered one of the weakest games in the franchise. On the other hand, there was Resident Evil Code Veronica, with a score of 94, is considered one of the best titles released in the Resident Evil series. First and foremost, it must be said that the game was initially released as an exclusive for the Dreamcast console, Sega's last console, which unfortunately faced commercial failure. Despite critical acclaim, the game did not achieve high sales due to the limited number of Dreamcast users. Therefore, Capcom ended the exclusivity a year later and released the game in 2001 as Resident Evil Code Veronica X for PlayStation 2 console. Code Veronica was the first game in the series to utilize fully 3D environments. Instead of pre-rendered 2D backgrounds, the camera angle was similar to previous installments, but this time the camera followed the main character, providing greater depth to the 3D environment. The graphics, reactions, and artificial intelligence of the enemies were significantly improved compared to the previous 3 games. Furthermore, this title was the first game in the series developed and released for 6th generation consoles The game's story takes place after the events of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Claire Redfield, one of the main characters in Resident Evil 2, after failing to find her missing brother in Raccoon City, travels to Rockfort Island in Antarctica 3 months after the city's destruction in search of clues about Chris Redfield. The game's story is considered one of its main strengths, and many fans regard it as one of the best narrative storylines in the history of the Resident Evil franchise. Despite the game's high quality, its sales never reached the level it deserved, selling only 2.5 million copies. We hope that one day, a remake of this valuable title will be made.
If you liked the video so far, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.
Resident Evil Survivor 2 Code Veronica. Release 2001. Meta unknown. Platforms arcade, PlayStation 2. Cost unknown. Sell unknown. Playtime story mode 45 minutes. In 2001, Capcom, in collaboration with Namco, decided to build a dedicated arcade machine exclusively for gaming centers. The game that ran on this machine, unlike the main series games, was a completely action-oriented title with no story, where 2 players could simultaneously move through the game map and kill zombies using 2 independent monitors. The machine's controls were also designed as realistic guns. The dimensions of this machine were 1.5 meters wide, 2.1 meters high, and it weighed 330 kilograms. The completion time for the game was around 45 minutes, and players had to repeat the game to increase their high score. Up to this point, everything seemed cool, even interesting and innovative. However, things went wrong when, a year later in 2002, Capcom decided to release the game for PlayStation 2, and that's where everything fell apart. The console version lacked the special arcade controls that made the game experience unique. The game ended in 45 minutes, and none of the attractions of the arcade version, including simultaneous 2-player gameplay with 2 separate monitors, were preserved. The game was so weak that no critics even bothered to review it, and no scores were recorded for it. So it's probably best if we don't talk about it anymore. Resident Evil Gaiden. Release 2001. Meta 56. Release platform Game Boy Color. Cost unknown. Sell unknown. Playtime story mode 4 hours. Side missions 2 hours. Completion 9 hours. This was the first time a Resident Evil game was released for a handheld console. The game's camera angle was top-down and switched to a first-person perspective when fighting enemies. In this mode, the aiming reticle moved dynamically from right to left, and players had to shoot enemies when the reticle was within the enemy's range. The game's story took place concurrently with Resident Evil Code Veronica. Leon S. Kennedy was tasked with confronting enemies aboard a passenger ship that had suffered a biological incident. Given the hardware limitations of the Game Boy console, the game's graphics and gameplay were not particularly impressive. Similarly, audience reception wasn't very high, as few people were interested in experiencing a horror game with such a style on a handheld console.
Thank you for watching. Goodbye.